And I have about 27 minutes on this battery, and so, but I'll let you know if we have to stop and just swap batteries real quick.
Okay.
So have you worked before together?
We did last year. We interviewed somebody, a woman who was Abba Eben's secretary
Ooh.
in New York when they were getting ready for the UN vote.
Fantastic.
Very interesting.
Very good.
Okay, whenever you're
So you want me to look at you?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, I am Eric Halivni, sitting with Dr. Ruth Westheimer in New York City on May 20th, 2013.
Hi.
Why don't we start by telling me a little bit about where you were born, your family,
Okay.
growing up?
All right. My name is Dr. Ruth Westheimer, and I'm very happy to talk about that part of my life that has to do with the creation of this wonderful country of Israel, where I'm visiting every single year. I'll tell you about that in a moment. So I was born in Germany. I grew up in Frankfurt am Main, an Orthodox Jewish household. My parents were middle class, upper middle class. Hold it, wrong. My parents were lower middle class. Can you check that? Take it out. Lower middle class parents, a lower middle class Jewish family. But I went to a very good school at the age of 6. I actually started before I was 6, the Samson Raphael Hirsch School. And I'm saying that because they didn't have much money, but education loomed large in my early childhood already. So I had a very happy childhood. I was an only child, and of Orthodox Jewish parents, going to synagogue, hearing the music of Lewandowski. And then in 1938, there were dark clouds on the horizon, and nobody really knew what exactly would happen, but there was an uneasiness. And I do remember going every Friday night with my father to synagogue, and he took money in his vest pocket for an ice cream, because after the Shabbat enters, he couldn't have paid me for an ice cream. So we got an ice cream on the way to synagogue, and then my father was taken to a labor camp right around the night of broken glass. And then a letter came.
How old were you?
And I was 10 and a half. And a letter came saying that I should go on that Kindertransport trip to Switzerland so that my father could come back to Frankfurt. I didn't want to go. I was a very happy child. I had a grandmother living with us who only had me to take care of, because she was a widow. She was my father's mother. I had 13 dolls. I had roller skates. I had everything that a little girl would have wanted. When that letter came, I did realize I had no choice, because my father had been taken to that labor camp some weeks before. I remember when the Nazis entered the apartment. There was no shouting, no hitting. My grandmother gave them money, which she took out from a long skirt in the seam, and said, take good care of my son. And then I remember going to the window and my father mounting a truck. I didn't know what was in the truck because it was covered, and turning around, waving, and with a very faint smile. And that's the last time I saw my father. When that letter came that I'm supposed to join that group of children, I had no choice. I did go. And in Switzerland, the children's home became an orphanage. My father did return to Frankfurt, and then the whole family, my other grandparents, the grandmother and my parents, were all taken to a concentration camp, first to Litzmannstadt, which is Lodz, and then to concentration camp. So the children's home became an orphanage. All of us 50 children who came from Germany became orphans. I went to a school in the home, and in 1945 I had a possibility to become a kindergarten teacher. I wanted to be pediatrician. I wanted to be a child psychiatrist, like many German Jewish girls. Not possible. No money, no parents, no high school diploma. There was no question that I could not study medicine. But they did offer me to be a kindergarten teacher at a seminary in Switzerland, and then the war ended, 1945. I went with that first ship that left Europe to go to then Palestine. In meantime, while I was in the orphanage, there were shlichim, there were emissaries from Israel. There were most of them, I think all of them, good-looking guys. So it wasn't difficult to make us very enthusiastic about becoming Zionist. I was not a Zionist as a child. My parents were Orthodox Jews and had a number to immigrate for America that was such a low priority that never would they have gotten there. So I became an ardent Zionist, and I'm still a very ardent Zionist. I go to Israel every single year. I speak Hebrew fluently, and I'm going right now again in a couple of weeks to Shimon Peres's 90th birthday. I'm only 85. I'm going to be 85, not yet. But I'm going to his 90th birthday, and I'm going to a conference that this is now my third year. The conference is called Machar. It means tomorrow, and it's a little bit like a Davos conference. Different people from different areas, and I give a lecture, I do a master class. Last year, they assigned a small room to me, and then they said, we can't let you use that room because there are so many people who want to hear you. They gave me the Teddy Kollek auditorium at the Binyanei Haumah. I loved it. I knew Teddy Kollek. I went to Israel every year, even during terrible times when there was a war. Teddy Kollek came to the hotel where I stayed to have tea with me. We spoke in German. So I was very happy in that conference. 1945,
Sorry,
with...
can we just take one so it's... Oh,
All right.
not sure. Okay, we're fine.
Are we fine?
Yes.
Okay. So I became very much a Zionist because the emissaries, the shlichim from Israel, were good-looking guys, but more importantly, I realized that Jews need a country of their own because, as everybody knows, in 1939 there was a conference in Evian. Let's save German Jewry. Even in 1938. Even Roosevelt sent an emissary, and the conference in Evian failed miserably. So I grew already up in Switzerland with the firm knowledge that Jews need a country of their own, so that if anything would happen, they have a place to go to. Because here in Europe, in that little country of Switzerland, there was no other place to go. I'm very grateful to Switzerland because the Kindertransport that I joined to Switzerland, some children went to Holland, Belgium, France. They did not make it. They are not alive. 10,000 went to England. That's a different story because many of them went to foster care. I went to an Orthodox Jewish children's home in Switzerland. So here I was very Zionist. I learned all of the songs of that era, and I decided I'm not going to go to a kindergarten seminary in Switzerland, I'm going to then Palestine. On that ship, we were many, many, many people, and do you remember the name of the ship? I always forget the name, so you find out. So the ship went from France, and what we actually did, which I did not know at the time, they took our certificate, because we went legally, and brought it back down on the pier and put other people on, so the ship was very crowded. We arrived in Haifa, and they took us to Atlit. That was very upsetting to us, because here I had a certificate. Legally, I came to Palestine. Why are the British putting me in a camp? I only stayed there for 1 week. It wasn't a hardship, but it was upsetting because there were wires and we couldn't get out. An uncle of mine, a brother of my mother, came from the kibbutz and threw us chocolate over the gedder, over the Zaun. So in any case, then I went to a kibbutz. I could have gone to the Aliyat HaNoah, age-wise, and work half a day and half a day study. But I decided, no, this new country needs pioneers, they need agricultural workers, they need people who will work the earth and not intellectuals. So I went to work a whole day. It was a big mistake. A whole day at the kibbutz. I realized after 1 year of picking olives and picking oranges and near the Galil in Ayanot, Ramat David, I realized I have to learn something. So I went for 1 year to Yagur and worked in order for them then to let me study to be a kindergarten teacher. I washed dishes. In 1947, so that was from 45 to 46, 47, I had an opportunity to go to Jerusalem and to enter a seminary of kindergarten teachers. I did it. I worked. I had no parents. I had no money. I had nothing from the kibbutz. The only thing they gave us is one of those mattresses made out of cash and a bed stand. That was all. No money, nothing. So I worked as a babysitter. I worked in the afternoon and in the evenings. In those days, a babysitter didn't watch television. There was no television. In those days, a babysitter ironed and did work.
Your family in Europe, did you?
Nobody survived. I did know that only after I was already in then Palestine, that there were no letters coming anymore already in 42. And then I did realize that they went from the lodge, Litzmannstadt ghetto, to Auschwitz. So I'm in Israel. I'm now in Palestine.
But you said your mother had a brother who came.
Who had come to Palestine, to a kibbutz, he's not alive anymore, to Ashdod Yaakov, Be'emek HaYarden. So I had one relative there. I had another relative, another brother of my mother, in San Francisco. I'll talk about that later. So here, all of us, was not an act of heroism on my part. All of us went into some kind of either Haganah or Lehi or Stern Group. I went into the Haganah. And I was trained. And now watch out, you people. I was trained as a sniper. I can still put 5 bullets into the red circle with a Sten gun. Doesn't exist today anymore. Half automatic, half not. I can throw hand grenades. If the photographer doesn't make me look good, watch out. So I was trained to be a sniper. I was also trained to be somebody who was on the rooftops of Jerusalem, watching our soldiers check all of the cars, a checkpoint, and with a radio, so if something would have happened, we could have called for help. I was there for a very short period of time. One night, after being on Shmirah, on watching over the rooftops, I went back to the residence of the students where I lived, near the Sochnut in Jerusalem, and the alarm rang. And I knew what it means. Go down to the shelter. But it was my birthday, my 20th birthday. Somebody had just given me a book. I said, hold it. I'll go up to the room, I'll pick up the book, and then I'll go to the shelter. When I came back to the hallway of that girl's residence, it was a Witzo residence, Pagas, a cannonball, came into that hallway. It killed some girls right next to me. and the resisim, the shrapnels, went all over my body and especially over my 2 feet. And that's not why I'm short. I would have been short anyway. And I was sent to the hospital. I thought I would die. I remember somebody opening my shoes. Her name was Hannelore, Aviva in Israel. And I said, do I have to die? And they sent me to the hospital. There was a brilliant German Jewish surgeon. Too bad he's not alive anymore because I would carry him on a silver platter. He was brilliant because he fixed my feet. I became later on in life a superb good skier, and I know how to dance the whole night if I find a good partner. So after I got wounded, there was a hafuga. There was a moment of peace. I went to Haifa. My friends wanted me to stay there. I said, no, I have to go back. Now I'm going to come to the day that Israel independence was declared. I remember that night very well because after Ben Gurion declared, I remember his voice, after he declared the state of Israel, all of us went on a truck and the whole night we didn't go to sleep. We went around Jerusalem singing and dancing. So I remember that night very well. Before that, that was after, after Israel was declared in May. That was before I was wounded. I also have to tell you that something very funny, how life goes. So I was one of the people in the Haganah. I was in the Haganah, and I was one of the people who told the British, go home. A few months ago, I was twice at Windsor Palace for dinner, and I was at Buckingham Palace for dinner with Prince Philip. He knew I was in the Haganah. What I did not talk about was that I told the British, go home. So that's how life goes. It's nice to be Dr. Ruth. Otherwise, I would never have been invited to Windsor Palace and to Prince Philip's birthday at Buckingham Palace. In those days in Israel, after the United Nations started to be working, never would I have believed, even if you would have told me, that there will be so many wars. I thought we now have a country, we are going to work together with the Arab citizens in that country, and we are going to build that country. We are going to make the Negev into a garden like Ben Gurion talked about. I would never have believed that the United Nations were so ineffective. I would never have believed that there was one war after the other. I go to Israel every year. Some years ago, I got the gas mask. And I went actually with a taxi driver. I had called the Pentagon first. I told them, I'm going to Israel. I would like to tell the American soldiers who are manning the Patriots, thank you. Because I also always say, if the Allied had not entered World War II, I would not be alive, because Hitler would have taken Switzerland. So I told the Pentagon, I'm going. They told me to call the ambassador. I did. The ambassador said, call me back. Somebody, a spokesperson, said, call back in an hour. I did. And I could hear, I'm a good psychologist, I could hear on his voice that the answer would be no, because what I wanted to do, and listen carefully, I did, is to go up to the place where the American and the Israelis are manning the Patriots, near Tel Aviv. So he said to me, they just had a meeting, and it was decided no more civilians on the base because they interrupt the work. I said, thank you, I hang up. For me, no is not a word. I took the taxi driver. I said, Moshe, do you know where that base is? He said, yes. I took my gas mask. I was in the taxi. I went to the base. At the base was some Israeli holding shmirah, watching. He said, I can't let anybody go up. We have a rule. I said, and the taxi driver started to fight with him. Not fist fight, just to fight. This is Dr. Ruth Westheimer from America, and she wants to get up there. I let them fight, And down the hill from the base came an American big shot. I don't know how many things he had. He was like a major American with a driver. Sticks his neck out. He says, Dr. Ruth, what are you doing here? I said, I need to go up to say thank you to the American and Israeli soldiers who are up on the base. He says to his driver, do we have time? The driver says, for Dr. Ruth, of course. I left my passport with the driver. I think I took the gas mask because they told us we can't walk without it. I went up to the base and big applause. Then I said, people, today I'm not going to talk about the subject matter that I usually talk about. Today I came here to tell you thank you. Booed. I got booed because they wanted to hear about sex. So I talked a few sentences, how wonderful what they're doing. And then I said, but I promise you, when you get back home after all this, you will have the best sex ever available. Big applause, I can still hear it in my ears. I later met the lieutenant in Washington at the Pentagon. That was before 9/11, when I did a book signing at the Pentagon. So there is no question that I never thought I would not live in Israel. But as life brings, I went with husband number one to Paris. He then went back to Israel, and I wanted to finish studying. Then I came to the United States, and I wanted to see that one uncle in San Francisco. I wanted to check out if he's as short as me. The one in Israel was short, but not as short as me. The one in San Francisco, short, but not as short as me.
Okay. Let me just make sure we look good rolling now.
What I can do is meet with the person who's coming at 3:30 and then come back to you if you want to.
It's 5 after 3.
We're rolling. You can continue. I apologize for the delay.
All right. So, what was the last thing I said?
You were just coming to Great Britain, and I think
They
you
went to San Francisco
San
to...
Right. Let me see, where do I want to start? Back about. So, what I want to say, the most important thing is, I never dreamt that I would not live my whole life in Israel. I have no complaints. I married an American. I have 2 children who went to very good schools, but every summer went to Shomer Tzair, so that they get that combination of a good private school with socialist, Zionist ideas in the summer, and also going to meetings during the year. And they now have each 2 children. So my husband passed away 16 years ago. So I never dreamt that I would live in the United States, but I'm not complaining, because what has happened to me, to be Dr. Ruth, and even now I'm going to be 85 on June 4th, still talking about that subject matter and giving talks in Israel. I did a lot of seminars in Israel and a lot of television about my professional life. But I think what you are doing is very important, so that we have a record for research and a record of how this wonderful Israel has started.
Thank you. I have a question for you. One of the things that has come up that we've talked about in a lot of the interviews that we've done is you had mentioned the fuga, the ceasefire. A lot of people got married during the ceasefire. A lot of people, there was, one of the things that we've talked about are these love stories in the different machtarot, in the different underground movements. And that's one of the themes that has been repeated. I'm just curious if, from your own personal...
Now, I am very careful not to ever comment on so-called studies if they are not scientifically validated data. However, for a documentary like yours, it makes a lot of sense to me that people under stress, if they already knew each other. Not if they just pick up somebody in the street, but if they know each other, that they say, let's get married so that we have a hold with each other. I even would say, but I don't have statistics on it, that making babies would make sense. Even if somebody says, maybe I'm not surviving, at least there's a baby. At least there is somebody who is continuing my name and is continuing. So it would make a lot of sense to me that people, not on the spur of a moment, but that people who have been in a relationship would say, why don't we get married? So that we know that we belong to each other.
Want the same?
But I don't understand why don't quote me
Okay, we're rolling whenever you're ready.
about you not getting funds for, don't quote me.
We won't put that on. Okay. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. We were starting to talk about a little bit about people getting married during the, and I'm curious also from your own experiences. From one of the things that people have talked about is during those years and the fact that women were played active roles in the Haganah and everything. How that, what your thoughts were on that, and if it was different than other places, if the way that men and women related to each other.
So one important thing to say, that in those years, it wouldn't have occurred to me to say that women shouldn't be in the Haganah. That it was just not part of the whole makeup. Because on the kibbutz, there was no question that women and men had equal rights. There were no question that women and men worked together. It's true, most of the tractor drivers in those years were men. That had something to do with physical force. But there was no question that the whole women liberation movement did not exist in those days in Palestine or then Israel. That came later. Once it was established Israel, then all of the problems of do women have equal rights and so forth came to the surface. On the kibbutz, it's also true that on the kibbutz in the beginning, there used to be equal work. Women worked in the fields and men worked in the fields. Once children came on the scene, it changed, because then you needed the women, first of all to take care of the baby, and then it became a different picture. The women went into the children's homes, because the children in many kibbutzim didn't sleep with the parents. They slept in children's homes for ideological reasons. And then also you had women being more active in the kitchen than men, and still men had to clean up the tables, they had to do their part, but it became more of a division. In the very beginning, in the fields, there was no problem between men's work and women's work. That has changed because Israel has become a modern country, and it has changed in terms of women having to fight for their equal rights.
I just want to make sure, if we were saying before, I don't know if it ended
Right.
up getting interrupted.
We'll do it
We were
again.
talking about you thought it was people getting married at that time, or having children, or similar to like the baby boom, generation.
Right.
Like
So there is no question in my mind that during difficult times, the need for human relationships, not just sexual relationships, but for somebody to count on, for somebody to be there for you, is even stronger than during normal times. So if somebody can show me statistics, which I don't know, that during the independence war in Israel, during the later wars, that there were more weddings, I would say it makes sense. You want to make sure that there is a normalcy to your life if you are under difficult situations, not just difficult, life-threatening. You did not know who would come home or who would be killed in battle. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Were you scared?
It's very interesting. When I think back now, look, it's many years ago, I was wounded on my 20th birthday. And now I'm going to have my 85th birthday. So it's a long time ago. I don't think I was scared during that time. I was concerned. And I think that once I was wounded, I was very scared that I would have to die, because I saw people dying next to me, and there is no question that I was worried that I would not make it, because I saw blood all over. But otherwise, I'm not somebody who is easily scared. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a superb skier.
Do you have any regrets about that period in your life? About
I tell you, the word regret does not exist for me. There is a song by Edith Piaf, Je ne regrette rien. I don't regret anything. So the whole issue of regret, it's not for me. I don't have anything.
If you want to just start with
Yeah.
the whole issue of regret. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. The whole issue of regret. I should have done this, or I should have done that, and why didn't I do this, or why didn't I do that, does not exist for me. I believe in Edith Piaf's song, Je ne regrette rien. I don't regret anything. And so when I look back, I have a tremendous amount of gratitude of what has happened to me. I'm alive while 1.5 million Jewish children were killed. True, I had a hard life. True, I was hungry many times. True, I had no money. True, I did not know I would be Dr. Ruth. But it's not in a category of regret. It's in a category of believing that you have to do the best to make a better world. I also believe in turtles. Don't give me a new one. I have plenty of turtles, not real ones, little miniature turtles. A turtle, if it stays in one place, it's safe. It carries its house on its back. I, for many, many years of my life, didn't have a home, didn't have an apartment, didn't have a house. So I believe in that image of the turtle. The turtle has to stick its neck out. It has to take a risk if it wants to move forward. The other reason of the turtle is the trademark of turtle in German, it's called Schildkröte. The dolls I had in Frankfurt as a little child, the mark on the back, on that celluloid, on that doll, was a turtle. So it kind of anchors me into my childhood of Frankfurt am Main. And I'm now doing, you are the first one to hear that, I'm now doing a children's book about turtles, how children have to take a risk, little children, when they get to kindergarten, when they get to first grade, when they are worried, when they are scared, to think about that turtle who has to stick its neck out. You like that?
I like it.
Okay.
Is there something from that era that you're particularly proud of, that you're looking back now, it's 65 years later, so thinking about the fact that you were involved in, that you were there when this happened?
I am very grateful that I went from Switzerland to Palestine, that I was helpful in building that country on the kibbutz and later in the Haganah. I am grateful for those experiences. I'm grateful that I didn't get killed. I'm grateful that I'm alive And there is something very serious about that. I have to be part of tikkun olam, of repairing the world. And that has to do, it's like what is called in German a Leitfaden. It's like a red thread that goes through my entire life. That I have not been killed, not by the Nazis, not in the War of Independence, like so many others. I have an obligation to make a dent in this world. I didn't know that would be by talking from morning till night about human relationships and sex. But that has become my profession, and I'm happy with that.
Anything from that era that lessons that you think that your children, grandchildren, that people should learn from?
Right. I'll tell you something. The Lamed Hay, the 35 young people in the Haganah who were killed on the way to Gush Etzion. The lesson there was a cousin of mine among those killed. He was 18 years old. His name was Engel, Chaim Engel, and kind of a second cousin, but I was very good friends with his mother. And his father had passed away already, but the mother was instrumental in giving me like a home, even though I didn't live there, in Jerusalem. The big problem, I went to see that Denkmal, which is like at Gush Etzion is like something where all of the names are listed. The bad thing there that I feel sad about is that these kids, 35 of them, were not well prepared. They were not well trained. They didn't have proper shoes. They didn't have the proper weapon. And they were ambushed, and they were really slaughtered in an awful way. So if anybody would say to me about what do you regret, yes, I regret that I don't blame anybody. That was the reality of life then. But I do regret that young people like that are not alive today. You know what I mean? It's on the way to Gush Etzion. It has, yeah, let me say that. Then you put it in. On the way to Gush Etzion is something that talks about Gurs, the concentration camp that French Jews were sent to, and it talks about the Lamed Hay. It talks about those, what's it called?
Nativ Halamed Hay.
Nativ. The Nativ Halamed Hay. It's kind of a stone structure with all their names on it, and I went many times already to visit there. So if you ask me about what should have been done differently, that would be one of the things.
Can we learn anything from that? The people, like the dedication of the people that you were with together in the kibbutz or in the Haganah, that is a lesson for today?
Yes. The lesson for today is that you must have some idealism. You must believe in something. You have to be outside of your own needs, outside of your own personality, to be responsible for something larger than you.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.